Here's a little fun fact. We have 13 units in this school year, and I'm getting ready to talk to you about Unit 10, Ecology. So we're getting there. We're getting to the end. First thing you need to know about this unit is that there are different levels of organization that we classify the world in, I guess. The biosphere is, hold on. The biosphere, let me do this. There, is the entire Earth where living things are found. That's the biosphere. A specific ecosystem is all the living and non-living things that interact with each other, factor into each other's existence in a particular area. A community is all the living things in an ecosystem. So you take out the non-living things like temperature and minerals and rocks and soil and things like that. All the living things are community. A population is a group of organisms that are all the same species, and obviously an organism is a living thing, just a single living thing. The other thing you need to know is the difference between habitat and niche. So habitat is the environment in which an organism lives. It's not unique to each species. So if we think about a robin, okay, robins are going to be coming back pretty soon if they haven't already. The robin's habitat is our area right here, the Midwest. Let's just say DuPage County. Okay, robins can live a lot of different places, but just for our purposes, let's say DuPage County. And robins live in, they kind of hop around in the grass, and they build their nests in bushes or trees. So that's their habitat. Now, a niche is a little bit more complex, a little bit more descriptive. It's the immediate environment plus what the organism eats plus specifically where it lives. And it's unique to each species, or else there's going to be competition and one organism will always outcompete another. So let's think about the robin in these terms. Robins might share a tree or share a bush where a nest would be built, but robins eat something very specifically. And if you didn't know already, robins eat worms. That's their niche. So they might live in the same tree, they might hop around on the same grass as other birds, but they eat worms. And that's what makes a difference between habitat and niche. Niche is very specific. Here's another comparison. Biotic versus abiotic factors. Biotic factors, prefix bio there, referring to living things. If you put an A in front of it, that makes it negative. Abiotic factors are non-living things. So temperature, abiotic. Number of fish, biotic. Amount of plankton, biotic. Salt content of water, abiotic. Pollutants, abiotic. Human fishing, biotic. There's the difference between those two terms. Symbiosis is a close relationship between two different species, organisms of two different species. And there are three main types of symbiosis. The first one is mutualism. Both organisms benefit. So what we see going on here is this guy, this bird, is eating the insects off of the cow's hide. So both organisms benefit. The bird gets food, the cow gets cleaned. Commensalism is where one organism is benefited and the other one isn't really affected at all. So we have clownfish in an anemone. Little Nemo reference for you there. The clownfish gets protection, shelter. The anemone isn't really affected. So I'll put a 0 for it's not affected. Parasitism is the last type of symbiosis. We have a mosquito and a human. Parasitism is when one organism is benefited or helped and the other one is harmed. So in this case, the mosquito gets food. We'll put a minus next to the human because the human either at the very least gets a mosquito bite, can get malaria for in areas that where mosquitoes have malaria, could get West Nile virus in this area. So that's parasitism. Predation is where there's a hunter and a hunted. The bear here is the predator, and the fish is the prey. I'm going to try this and see what happens here. We take this out of drawing mode. Can I open this? It cannot be found. Okay. Just kidding. Remind me, I'll show you that in class. Pyramids. Just like it sounds. Geometry class. There are 3 main types of pyramids. We'll talk about all of them. Pyramid of energy, pyramid of biomass, and pyramid of numbers. Pyramid of energy is important to know. Each level shows the amount of energy that's available. And what you need to notice is this. 90% of the energy is lost in between each level. And that energy is lost as heat. Keep that in mind. So you have that right here. Energy is lost as heat. Look at the numbers here. So the primary producers have 100% of the energy. The primary producers make their own food, the plants. 10%, the people, the herbivores, the organisms that feed off of plants, the primary consumers, only 10% of that original amount of energy is left. To the meat eaters, the secondary consumers, 1%. And then the top level, only 0.1%. So that energy availability affects the amount of individuals and the number of individuals, just the sheer weight of the individuals at each level. So here's a pyramid of biomass. This is just the sheer amount of mass. So here, the mass of all the plants in this particular ecosystem, in this community. Then all of the plant eaters, the mass of all of them. And you can see that this is decreasing as well. Secondary consumers, third level consumers. Then finally we have pyramid of numbers. So this is just a population count. If you look at all the plants in an ecosystem, in a community, way more in number, and you're counting each blade of grass as being a plant. Way more primary producers than the plant eaters. Way more plant eaters than animal eaters. And then the top level animal eaters, even fewer of them. So because the amount of energy is decreasing, the biomass and the population size decrease as well. A limiting factor, just like it sounds, it limits the population growth of an organism in a food web when it's not available. Make sure you understand that. So, nutrient, space, sunlight, etc. When it's introduced, it will increase the population. So if a limiting factor or a limiting nutrient is what it's also called, is supplied, population will grow. We got nutrient cycles. These are the different nutrient cycles: water, carbon, nitrogen, phosphorus. Energy flows in one direction, from the sun and up through the ecological pyramid, or up through the food web. Nutrients cycle. I'm positive you've studied the water cycle before. You've heard these ations: evaporation, there's condensation up here before there's precipitation. Transpiration is the water loss from the leaves. We have runoff down here. So there's also, like I said, there's condensation. Condensation up here too. Here's the carbon cycle. Carbon is passing through living things right here. Photosynthesis, respiration. That's where we're passing through living things. Extra carbon is introduced into the carbon cycle right here. Human processes, combustion of fuels, industry, and homes. So here we have more photosynthesis here. Carbon's passing through living things underneath the water. So this is the carbon cycle. Nitrogen cycle. Plants can't use the nitrogen in the atmosphere. So there are two things that happen to nitrogen. The first one is the nitrogen gets fixed, literally fixed for the plants. Bacteria do this. Bacteria fix the nitrogen so that plants can use it. Plants need nitrogen in order to live. And then there's another process called denitrification, where there's another set of bacteria that convert nitrogen compounds back into nitrogen gas. So there's a cycle right there. Here's the nitrogen fixing bacteria. Here's that's under the water, and then nitrogen fixing bacteria under the soil. Plant roots just in the soil in general. And then we have denitrifying bacteria right here that returns the atmospheric nitrogen back up into the air. Here's the phosphorus cycle. So the phosphorus cycle, what you see here is animal wastes contain phosphorus, decomposers break down phosphorus, right here more decomposers, so on and so forth. So phosphorus cycles through as well. We add phosphorus, humans add phosphorus to the phosphorus cycle through drainage. A lot of our soaps and detergents contain phosphates to help get things clean. And unfortunately that goes off into our water supplies, and it can cause problems. I'm back on the nitrogen cycle. There's one more thing that I wanted to mention here. Nitrogen is, animals contribute to the nitrogen cycle when they die and when they excrete wastes. So the decomposers also, here excretion, animal wastes, decomposition of dead animals. Those are all two ways that animals contribute to the nitrogen cycle. And then we talked about nitrogen fixation, phosphorus cycle. Like I said, phosphates are in detergents. we can add those, and that's a limiting nutrient. Nitrogen and phosphorus are. If you add those, it can cause an overgrowth of algae, and that algae, like if you see a pond that has like that green scum on the top, that blocks out the sunlight for the plants down below. Those plants can't do photosynthesis, they die. The organisms, the fish, the snails that feed upon those plants underneath the surface will die out also. So adding extra nutrients like nitrogen and phosphates into the water supply, yeah, it's good for plants, but only if they can get sun. So if there's too much growth on the top, that can be a problem. Movement of energy versus nutrients. Make sure you understand this. I already mentioned it. Energy moves in one direction only, from the sun up through a food web. Nutrients move in a cycle.